Are y'all tired? you good? I know that was a lot. So let me start by saying this. When I decided to do this story, I called my husband immediately and said, how big of a problem is it to put like 26 verses on the slide? Because at least I'm considerate of others. But here's the deal. When I looked at this story, I was like, wow, Lord, it's like all you laid it out for me. I didn't even have to do much work. But it didn't feel right to only pick part of the story, because I think the whole story really gives us a fuller picture of healing and the obstacles thereof. So this morning, the obstacles we're talking about are ingratitude and discontent. And I'd like to lay out a couple terms and a couple definitions, because that's just how I roll, because I like to know what we're doing. So healing comes in many forms, right? It's not just physical healing. This story talks about physical healing, but that's not necessarily the only type of healing that we all need, right? We need physical healing, emotional healing, spiritual healing, all those things in our life. And while this story speaks sort of specifically to a physical healing, I think a lot of the underlying tone has to do with real emotional type healing, and we're going to get to that in a second. Two, being ingratitude and discontent. I mean, we all know what it means to be not grateful, right? And we all know what it means to be discontented. So let's jump into this story a little bit. So we see that Naaman was obviously this very important general. In the Message version, it talks about him being a truly great man. So right here and now, I would like to debunk all that nonsense that we say as Christians, that why do bad things happen to good people? All right, now listen, I know people get offended when we go here, but I'm just gonna own it today, because I don't know how else to be. Bad things do happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. Bad things happen to just, normal average people. This is the world we live in. And in my life, I have dealt with physical healing and I deal with emotional healing regularly. But these are things that I know about why these things happen. These aren't good answers. Like, listen, I'm going to tell you right now that I don't like half of this. But this is the world we live in. We live in a fallen world. So there's sickness, there's disease, it's decaying. That's what happened at the fall, right? Sometimes sin gets us into trouble, let's be real. Sometimes, and again, I'm being real here, so love me anyway. Sometimes sin gets us, right? We drink too much and we do something stupid, right? That's a consequence of sin. Sometimes, right, other people's sin splashes onto us. Like when you're the one receiving the person that drank too much is nonsense. Get it? So healing happens for many, many reasons. Those are three that I think are really specific, that I think kind of carry across the board. Fallen world, sin, and other people's sin, right? So there's that. Here's the other thing I know. Just based on the first three verses, status, race, etc., have literally nothing to do with anything. We are all equal on the playing field as far as life and learning and who God is to each of us, right? So there's that. So Naaman, while truly a great man, somehow contracts leprosy. Now back in the day, leprosy was like a big, not a cool thing to have. There were, Israelites believed you got it because you did something horrible and God wanted to smite you in some way. Sometimes it was just around. This particular passage doesn't really get into it, other than he was a really good dude, did a lot of awesome stuff. The Lord was with him, whether he realized it or not, and somehow he still has leprosy. Here's the next part that I find very interesting in this next top section of the first couple verses. It says that it just happened that in one of their raiding expeditions, they capture a young girl. Now listen, I know we're all not about this, right? But here's the deal, and there's a good lesson in this. Sometimes we are in captivity. Maybe not literally that way, but we can find ourselves in captivity to sin, to other people, to emotions, all that stuff. And guess what? God can still use us, right? it's important to know that, because sometimes we find ourselves in a place where we think all this truly great stuff is happening around us, and here we are stuck in our box and everything's horrible. This girl wasn't doing that, and I'm sure it wasn't cute when her city got raided, and I'm sure that it was hard to now be a servant to someone else. But guess what? She still says, even in probably one of the worst circumstances you can be in that time, says, oh man, if only my master could meet this guy in Israel, he could heal him. She's not like, good, I hope Naaman gets it twice. Do you see what I'm saying? This is what we do, but there's lessons in a story that may be familiar to some of you that sometimes I think we overlook. We look at the main big picture of a story, but there's little things in here that are real important, so that's another one. So what does Naaman do? He follows the chain of command. He goes to his person above him, because guess what? We all answer to somebody, whether we like it or not, and says, listen, I'm really discontented with this disease, and this girl says that I can be healed, so how can we make this happen? So here's when we need to talk about discontent a little bit. There are times when discontent is good. We also don't talk about that either. We have this idea of because in the New Testament it talks about be content in all things. Now I agree, there's a time when we need to learn to be content. However, there's times when God stirs up discontent in us. Yes, God does that, even though we'd like to think he doesn't. And a good example would be babies. When they have a dirty diaper, what do? They're like, hey, get me out of this. This is not comfortable. And sometimes when things in our life aren't comfortable, the Lord's like, that's not comfortable, is it? It's not comfortable. You really shouldn't be content in something that's not good for you, right? However, sometimes, and I'll use myself as an example, when I had liver disease, I had liver disease for a very, 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 very long time. A very long time. And it was long, and it was hard, and it was all that stuff. And in that, I should have learned, and I didn't in that time. I can look back now and say this, right? That if I would have just been content in what I was given and leaned in a little bit to it and let the Lord do what he was going to do, I might not have had so much emotional healing to do afterwards. So there's a difference between being discontented, maybe there's a rub emotionally or spiritually that isn't quite right, that the Lord's like, we can fix this, we can fix this. And then there's sometimes things that are long-winded that we need time to heal. And we need to learn to be content in the process. So I just want to make that very, very clear. So there's a process and an order to things. So let's skip down a little bit. So Naaman's boss sends a letter to Israel's boss and says, hey, I have this guy who needs to be healed. Make it happen. Why do we go to the wrong people to be healed? Why do we do that? Am I wrong? We do this. I do this. I won't speak for you. I do this. I go to all the wrong people. I'm like, this is really bothering me. I'll talk to you, and I'll talk to you, and somebody tell me that I'm right in this even when I'm really wrong. I do that. We have to stop going to the wrong people. This guy is like, why did you come to me? Sometimes we put things on other people that don't belong to them. We have to be really careful with how we deal with certain things. It's hard. It's hard when we're hurting. It's hard when we're physically drained. It's hard. I'm not going to stand up here and pretend like it isn't. So, Elisha then hears that the king is really distressed now because he can't heal this guy. So, here's the deal. Here's the important part. If someone comes to you and is looking for healing and you're like, I can't do this, this is the answer that should always be. And if people are coming to you, you need to give them and send them to Jesus. There's no need to rip our robes. There's no need to get all up in arms. We, in and of ourselves, can't do things just like the king. We do not have, just in our flesh, the ability to, wave a magic wand and heal people emotionally or physically. However, we do have something in us that can do that. we have the Lord. And I feel like this is a picture of that. When Elisha says, listen, you don't need to be upset, send it to me, I got it. It's not that Elisha has it, but he knows that the Lord will take care of it on his behalf. So there's that. So again, we see Naaman arrives at Elisha's door all decked out with his chariots and his nonsense. And status, again, still has nothing to do with it. Right? Because Elisha doesn't even come out the door to greet him. He's like, listen, Naaman, go and wash and you'll be good. And here is where I feel like, at least for me, I have been here and I have done this. I have been very ungrateful when the Lord is like, look, I have this for you. You just got to walk through it. I'm not promising it's easy. I'm not promising you're going to like it. You have to walk through it anyway. And just like Naaman, I stomped and got real mad because I didn't want to do what God wanted me to do. And I think we all do that if we're very, very honest with ourselves. Sometimes we just don't like what God is asking. We just don't, because it's hard. Sometimes he wants us to go to the people that have hurt us. Sometimes he wants us to go to the doctor that we don't really like their bedside manner. I know that has been my life lately. Sometimes that's just things we have to do in order to break through the obstacle that is leading, that we need to get through to our healing. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a lot of little tidbits in here. I know this is not a normal sermon. This is not normally the way I teach. But when I asked the Lord, what should I teach? He said this story. And I looked at it and I went, whoa, Lord. So I hope you're tracking with me. We don't have a lot of time. And there's still a little bit to get through. So Naaman gets mad. And then his servants follow him and they say, and I love this. This is like one of my favorite things because I do this. Well, if he would have asked you to do something heroic, if he would have asked you to slay 1,000 armies, you would have been like, yeah. But you won't go wash. Like, come on. And I cannot tell you how many times the Lord at least has told me, just sit still, would you? And let me take care of it. Just sit still. You don't even have to do anything. Just sit right there. I got it. And I'm like, sit still. Who sits still, Lord? And you know what? If he would have asked me to jump up and down 500 times and go, speak on stages and do all this stuff, I would have been like, sure, Lord, that sounds fun. Why can't we just do the easy stuff? And with that, Naaman's like, oh, all right, guys, you're right. So he does it. We can be made new. And sometimes it just takes a simple act of obedience. And believe me, I am preaching to myself this morning. This is not just, for you and you and you, it's for all of us. Sometimes it just takes obedience, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm rebellious and I don't like to obey all the time. So there's that. So Naaman does what he's supposed to do. He goes and washes, he takes care of it, he's healed, which is really miraculous and really cool, and sometimes I wish the Lord still did some crazy stuff like that today. That'd be awesome. And believe me, he still does. We just don't hear about it a lot. But this is what I love. This is one of my favorite parts of this story. He then comes back and he tries to pay off Elisha. And let me tell you, how often do we do that? When God fixes a situation for us or changes a circumstance and we're like, yes, Lord, and now I'm going to serve all the time. I'm going to greet, and I'm going to sing, and guess what? You know what that leads to? That just leads to burnout and craziness. That's what it does. The Lord's like, I took care of it at the cross. I don't need your stuff. I don't need it. It's okay. I'm glad you're grateful. It's awesome. Just worship me. It's cool. You don't need to try and pay it back. And so many times we do that. We do our best to try and work up a way to fix what we've done. And that's not God's economy. That's not how this works. So this is what I love. This is what Naaman says. He goes, all right, fine. You don't have to, I won't give you anything, but can you give me something? Can you give me 2 teams of donkeys full of dirt? All the dirt that they can carry. And I looked at this, I'm like, Lord, why dirt? What are you doing? And this is, right here, an example of how we fall into ingratitude and discontent after we've been healed. Naaman takes this dirt and he brings it home so that he can remember and he can worship there on the land of the God of Israel, not on the land of the pagan land he's from. He brings it home to remember. We do not create enough memorials in our life. So many other cultures do this, and our culture does not. I don't know why. The American culture is very like, oh, we're done, let's throw it away. I've moved on from that. You know what? If we move on so far that we can't remember what God has done, we can never move forward anymore. We have to remember the things that he has done. Sometimes we just need some dirt or a rock of remembrance. You know, we sing that song all the time about Come Thou Fount and raise an Ebenezer. That's what it's talking about. It's raising a memorial. It's raising a thing so that we remember the work that God has done in each of us. And this is the other thing. Sometimes we get healed, but people around us may not be at the same place we are. And I love this. He says to Elisha, listen, I'm still going to have to go back to work after all this. I'm still going to have to go with my master to the temple that he worships in. Like, how's this going to work? Because I really, really want to worship God, but I still have to do my job. And Elisha's like, it's all good. God's got it. It's fine. Like, you're not responsible for him and his healing. You're responsible for you, and I think we forget that. At least for me, I can say this truly. Sometimes I get to a place where I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, well, how come all these people aren't where I'm at? It gets real easy to get real judgy, and I love that Naaman's not trying to be judgy at all. He's just like, listen, you know what? How do I do this? How do I do it? And he's like, you go and you do your job and you do your best. And you do what you need to do. And God is still with you, even when the people around you are doing crazy stuff. He's still there. And then, and this is why I couldn't leave this part out, even though I know we're running out of time. We got good old servant Gehazi throwing a monkey wrench into this situation, right? Naaman's cool. He's headed home. Everything's great. And somebody's going to try and jump up and steal his joy and steal his healing. Now, let me tell you, this happens in our life. We get to a place where everything's cool, and somebody's like, hey, can I get this? Or can I get that? Or what about this? Or let me tell you what this person did to me. You know, the person that that relationship has just been healed, let me tell you what that person just did. We deal with this a lot. And again, we are responsible for us. We are responsible. And we are responsible to respond the way Jesus would respond. And listen, I don't like this just as much as you. Because sometimes we just want to have revenge. We just want to take people out. We just don't want to deal with it. I know I don't. And what happens? This guy comes up out of nowhere, gives him some crazy fake story about, well, we need money, we need this, we need that. And Naaman's like, oh, you asked for 75? I'll give you 150. Can you imagine what the world would be when people come at us and we say, oh, you need 75? I'll give you all of it. What happens when we behave that way? Situations change, whether we know it or not. Now listen, Naaman wasn't responsible for Gehazi's lies. He was responsible for his response. And he did the right thing. And I love the exchange that Gehazi and Elisha have after all is said and done. It reminds me of Adam and Eve in the garden a little bit, where, they take of the apple, they sin, the fall of man happens, and God says, psst, hey Adam, where are you at? It's the same scenario, different story. So Gehazi, where you been? He's like, nothing. I wasn't doing nothing. And that's how Adam responds. This is just such a picture of us and our humanity. We weren't doing anything. And Elijah's like, don't you know that I am with you wherever you go? Isn't that makes me think of like, where can I hide from your spirit, Lord? You know, God is with each and every one of us. He sees. And the people who deal harshly with the people of God get what they get in God's time. Now, let me explain something. Don't be sitting around waiting for when somebody who wronged you to get their just desserts. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. I say that with some laughter because sometimes we wish we could see the end result of this. But guess what? It doesn't always work that way. But we all reap what we sow. And if it were me, I want to be sowing what Naaman's sowing. I want to sow 150 when somebody that's hurt me asks for 75. We need to be very, very careful when it comes to our healing and the healing of others, right? That we need to remember when discontent is a good thing and when discontent is a bad thing. And may we always be grateful for the God that we serve, that He doesn't let us get away with stuff, that He's always with us. He's always ready, willing, and able to heal us if we're just obedient. Amen? Amen.